Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snider. It is 11:03 a.m. on the 19th of May, and I've got Alexander Ramsey McCaig here. Alexander, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Mark. Thanks for having me back on the show. You and I are just spending copious amounts of time together.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
It really does. I'm starting to get to know your personality pretty well.
It's quirky, as you can tell. And let me apologize for saying that mountain climbers are crazy, because I know you're not crazy.
No.
Well, maybe
it depends on the people who, want to engage with me. They may think I'm a little crazy,
But you're a real mountain climber.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I guess, I had a discussion about this the other day. I had somebody over my house and we were watching a film called The Alpinist. If you haven't seen it, watch it.
Okay.
When you're up on like big slabs of granite, you're never not uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a risk. Like, you're up there, and then you have to go through some things. You're like, okay, this feels a little sketchy. You have to remind yourself of the safety measures you have in place and taking it step by step. The one thing I've taken from this, from rock climbing, and being up in the mountains, it teaches me how to adjust to my, what I would say is like a fear response.
That's good.
In extremely stressful situations, rather than having the fear response take over, I'm actually able to act through it with a level of rationale. And so for most people, when the fear kicks in, the adrenaline hits, increase in blood pressure, increase in heart rate, right? Dilation of the eyeballs. The senses start to spool up, and then they're trying to adjust to the things that are going to attack them. Now, when you're up there on a rock wall, it's silent. There's wind on your back. There's cool granite, hopefully granite, underneath your hands. You're tied in with a rope. You feel the pressures, around your waist, through the harness and stuff like that. And you feel that response come in, but you have to sit there and adjust to it, because there's nothing else you can do, because you're just a couple inches away from the granite that's in front of you. And you don't really want to, most of the time, turn around and look at the sights that are behind you. No matter how beautiful they are, don't do that when you're in the state of fear response.
Exactly.
The worst part, and then I'll shut up about rock climbing, when you get to the top, you don't want to leave all your stuff up there. You have to clean a route. So there's a procedure that happens up at the top by the anchor, where you have to essentially take the rope off of your harness. Now, the worst part is having to go through in your head when you're, say, 120 feet up or higher. I have to take this rope off. If I drop this rope, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
Someone's going to have to bring it up to me, so then I'll be stuck on the wall for hours, and hopefully there's a collective amount of people around in the area. If not, you can't just have your partner bring it up to you, because someone has to belay them up. But you're untying this thing, and it's every single time, you have to do it, the procedure, but it's always uncomfortable doing it, because there's that moment when you're like, I am untying myself on a completely vertical cliff face, nothing underneath me, and I have to do this right. But what it does also, through that state of fear, right, when you deal with it for a second in the beginning, you have to slow everything you're doing down and be extremely conscious of every single movement. You feel me on that?
You do this for fun.
Oh, I do it for fun. I love it. I love it. And what's a really cool thing that I found, I have, like you see him wearing a smartwatch. There's this thing called HRV. It deals with the recovery of your heart, how well you adjust to stressors throughout one day and then what it looks like the next day. I actually found that if I rock climb indoors, I'm exhausted, right? And then the next day, my HRV is low. I don't have a very good recovery. My heart hasn't bounced back from the long workout. If I go outside and I'm climbing on large slabs of rock all day long with the sun beating down on me, my HRV is significantly higher the next day. So for me, there's some sort of positive energetic connection, even though I'm having an expenditure of energy through my body itself. There's something going on with me in nature while I'm out there on the rock.
You're getting something back.
It gives me something back when I do it. Yeah.
That's good.
I All right, that's all I have to say about rock climbing. I won't go any more into it.
We could go a long way into that, but maybe we shouldn't. Because I have so many other tangents.
I know you do. I know you do. Which one do you want to start on first?
It seems like a long time since we talked, but it's only been a week, I guess.
You missed me that much, Mark?
Yeah, I must have.
Yeah, you must have.
There is more and more information coming out about this Ozempic. Do you still have any of that fresh in your mind?
Yeah. So do you want to go over it?
Let's do it. Because it's really important, man.
Would you like to, you want me to give a background on it? Or
you can if you want to.
Okay, so there's a lizard out here in New Mexico called the Gila monster. Really cool looking lizard. It's kind of orangish and black colored. Lives in the southern part of the southwest part of the state here. Now, back in the 80s, there was a biochemist that was going out and studying, or biologist in some sense, going out and studying this lizard in this region of the U.S. And they found out that the venom, right? Because when you're out there, you trap them and then you capture the venom to understand it. And many people are like, "Ooh, we can create an anti-venom in case I get bit by this or whatever happens." And he was out there with a gastroenterologist, and they were doing some studies, and they found that there's this large peptide hormone-like thing that comes from the venom of this thing called the Gila monster. And this the venom itself is called exendin 4. And what they found is that because we have machines for genetically cloning things like CRISPR, we could do cool things with it because there was a response that happened from this thing for the lizard. For whatever benefit it gives to the lizard, we found that this response from exendin 4 helps with a thing called GLP-1. And GLP-1 has these receptors that are in your gut lining and also in your brain that help you in your body secrete insulin to deal with the food that's coming in, right? To adjust the blood sugar, the glucose levels in the body. Now, the guys that had found this were like, "Oh, this is really cool. This could help the worldwide issue around diabetes, right? Or pre-diabetes." Mm-hmm. And they're like, if this thing, which doesn't metabolize super quickly in the body, and you don't need as much of it as much as you need as a direct shot of insulin, right? Mm-hmm. And insulin has to be pumped into you because it's a large peptide. They can't be taken orally. What happens is they're like, "Oh, this may work really, really well because it's going to suppress the sensory mechanisms for GLP-1 in the brain for like wanting to be hungry and all this other stuff, and also increase insulin secretion, which is what diabetic people are going to be deficient in when they eat specific foods." And so this Ozempic, when you put it into yourself, taken from this GLP-1 clone from the exendin 4 from the Gila monster in New Mexico, created this drug, right? This large peptide that people could take, and it would actually help counter many of the effects of diabetes. Now, a secondary effect of this was weight loss, because not only is it increasing the insulin secretion in the body naturally through the gut, but what they also found is that because it's suppressing the GLP-1 receptor in the brain, you don't want to eat as much. So it was a twofold benefit from this lizard venom, that I'm not eating as much, which is going to help me with my diabetes. I'm going to lose some weight so my body can achieve a better equilibrium. It's easier to metabolize this Ozempic stuff that's going in my body. And two, it can help me counter a lot of those poor diabetic effects and not have to deal with other large peptides like insulin, which is difficult for people to get hands on. They don't like stabbing themselves with it all the time. So that's all I have on the background of Ozempic. I don't know what you want to talk about with it, but that's what I know.
Well, one of the things that people don't discuss very much, and I can understand why they don't, because nobody would try to sell a drug this way, but this Ozempic paralyzes the vagus nerve, which causes the valve in the stomach to remain closed.
Sure.
So the food doesn't enter the stomach, and then they get into this cyclic vomiting.
Yeah, I mean, that could happen as a side effect. So remember I said it's going to suppress some of the things that are going on in the head?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there could be a combination, a hormonal connection, because that's what it's doing. It's adjusting hormones, so that hormonal response is going to change when you take an outside stimulus. So it is possible that a side effect of that could be the anti-stimulation of the vagus nerve in the brain.
It's weird because some people it doesn't seem to affect that much with the throwing up. Other people will throw up like 100 times a week.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just horrific.
And there's also there's another aspect to this with medicine. Most of the time, the people that take this are already extremely unhealthy.
Yeah.
So it's probably not a one-to-one like causation. There's probably a correlation with it, but there's probably many other things that are going on at the same time with these people and, how they're reacting to the drug itself.
The other thing that I heard is that it can cause really horrible constipation because it increases the width of the intestine wall. And so to the point where sometimes you have to have an operation to clear.
I wonder if there's an inflammatory response. There could be something. I don't know all the side effects. I just know a little bit of the history and what the purpose for the creation of this thing was. For losing weight, diabetes, problem. Pre-diabetes, problem. People's diet, problem. Okay? The food they choose to eat, problem. Their mental habits, core issue. People are lazy. They become overweight. They eat poorly. It mirrors their thought patterns. And then they go for an outside stimulus to come in and try and fix themselves when they really should have fixed it earlier. Especially for type 2 diabetics. Type 1, you're born with the issue. What are you going to do? I can't do it, right? So hopefully this is, like a little bit of a saving grace for them. But for others, you got to put the work in. You can't eat poorly. And remember, if it goes mind, then body, then spirit. You have to figure your thoughts out so that your body can be figured out. And then after your body's figured out, you can start working on the development of your spirit. But those things, they won't happen in any other order. And for most people, they just want to put a Band-Aid on stuff. And so, oh, wow, this is an easy way to lose weight. Think about how many weight loss schemes they've been since, I don't know what time, right? Forever.
Yeah.
Most of it, diet, environment induced, right? It's habitually induced issues that these people give themselves, right? And then they jump into these other drugs, and there's big markets for it because there's so many people that are overweight and diabetic.
And I think a lot of the weight they lose is like 30 or 40% lean body mass. So it's not just like you're dropping fat.
No, they're gonna lose everything. One, because they're not active.
Right.
Right. And then two, when they're losing the weight, everything's going to get chewed up. Because when you're in states of obesity, your body's in a state of almost constant starvation, constant survival mode. And so the hormonal triggers are a little bit different. So it's actually going to start burning off your muscle, right? Throughout this process. You're not going to be burning off the fat. Well, actually, it's not going to burn off the muscle. What happens is you're going to store more of those calories as best as possible. So they're in this really poor, sick cycle. But when they're losing weight, they just stop eating altogether. You have to have exercise at the same time. You have to build up the mass internally, right, of good things to support the skeletal structure while decreasing, the excess residual fats that sit everywhere. And plus, they're going to have a lot of other fatty tissue issues internally on the organs themselves because of those levels of obesity.
There's a lot. They're making, I forget, like billions and billions of dollars off this drug. It's unbelievable how much money they're making off this drug.
Now, there's a good portion of people, though, that do get help from it. And the pharmaceutical industry makes a ton of money. But here's the thing. If I'm obese, if I'm diabetic, type 2, I can go in, talk to a doctor and be like, how can I do this? Well, son, you don't work out, you eat like shit. I can prescribe you something called Ozempic. It's had pretty good, case study success. All right, I'll try that. And that's what they do. And they'll take it because, life requires work. Life requires effort. The body requires maintenance, just like your mind does. You can't just let the thoughts run wild. You have to care for these things. You have to tend to them like a garden. You have to take the weeds out and get rid of them, right? Now, for most people, they're just too lazy to do so. And then you have these compound effects through their belief states, through their laziness, all these things. And then they build and build and build and build, and they're just looking for the easiest way out rather than just doing the hard work themselves. They're looking for outside things to fix them rather than doing the internal fixing. So for me, as a total, there's a lot of overweight people out there. Very kind people. Great. I do have some difficulties with respecting their lifestyles. I don't agree with it. I respect their choice. I respect their ability to make choices, but do I agree with it? Do I think it's disrespectful to the human body and the rest of nature to walk around and choose to be obese through your laziness? Absolutely. 100%. I can take that right through a logical line, soup to nuts. When you're born, you're not just like, in most cases, born like this giant obese baby. No, it's almost like an earned behavior over time through your actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know? People find that harsh, but frankly, you just don't care about yourself enough. And then how could you care about the environment or anything else if that's how you treat yourself internally? And then the thoughts mirror that, you know? So that it's all one thing at all times.
I came across some stuff in Might Have Thoughts in regards to honesty.
Mm.
You know, like sometimes we're not honest with ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Like sometimes you don't want to look at your stomach, you know? It's like, do I really? Does it really?
Shit. Yeah, that doesn't look good.
Right.
That's a nice looking dad bod, you know?
Exactly. It's okay. Let me read this. This is page 48. It says, better off in every regard that the unhonest human being, who moreover, in contrast to the honest one, stagnates in his evolution, or only progresses with extreme difficulty, and thereby suffers horrendous failure.
Mm-hmm.
So lack of honesty can do a lot of damage in your life.
Yeah, what happens is when you're not being honest with you, yourself, or others, you have to put on a facade to that outside party or to you. And so what you're doing is you're not focusing on real core values of your personality itself, or the things that are best for you. You're sitting around saying, oh, I'm healthy. You know, just to take the obesity thing. I'm healthy, I'm good, I'm pretty, I'm beautiful. No, you're not. You're fat. You're overweight. You got to take care of yourself. You actually don't look good, right? It's repulsive in some sense, but you're lying to yourself. And then you have these markets of people that show up, like, you know, Target, and then you have these mannequins that are the size of football players. And it's like, no, we should not okay that. We don't need to okay people to be super thin like supermodels. That's not necessary. But a nice, sustainable equilibrium that is balanced and healthy, that makes sense. Normal body. It's okay to have a little gut. Who gives a shit? But if you're totally out of whack, completely out of disproportion, you're going to see that. You can't lie to yourself. Because now you're prolonging an issue. You're lacking that honesty. And when people engage with you, they're going to feel that. They're going to feel that dishonesty, right? And if someone gets pissed at me because they're listening to this, Mark, they have an internal issue with themselves, with their own body image. I'm not bashing anyone. They just know, and they're not going to like these words, but that's important because I'm being honest about it. And most of them won't be honest with themselves. So there's going to be backlash. And you see this all the time. And that's where you get that crazy amount of pain, that crazy amount of fire. You know, that what you just talked about here, like the greater issue for them later on in life. That's what happens. They're over a compound amount of time, through the cause and effect. They're building up this weird life pressure through this like system of lies and dishonesty around themselves. And it cripples them at some point, whether it's an emotional breakdown, a psychotic break, a physical health body break, you know, through stress or some other mechanism. They all come back around at some time. And so if you continue to ignore honesty and truth of yourself and how you act and function, not only you and others, you're going to feel a ton of that pain later. It doesn't go anywhere else. It comes right back to you. You can't ignore it long enough. Why? Because the truth always prevails.
Here's something that Billy said that I'd like your input on. He said, every unhealthy stain must be removed from the consciousness, from the psyche. So these unhealthy, unhonest thoughts are like stains. That's a great analogy. That's just perfect.
Well, stains are good. They're not permanent. You can wash them, right? Yeah. They don't have to be there. There's a little bit of discoloration, but you can work. Maybe if you put it down on the old school washboards and you're scrubbing it yourself, you know, the ones that sit on the wood pails, it takes work. It takes effort to get rid of that thing. You know, for us, we think stain, hit it with Tide, throw it in the machine. Hopefully it comes out, looks good, you know? Great. But work has to happen for the removal of that. There has to be a little bit of friction, a little bit of agitation, right? A little bit of effort and focus to remove that stain itself. Like polishing a coin, right? It's still a coin, but the coin lacks its luster. And it needs the time, it needs the focus, it needs the attention, it needs the assiduousness of that individual to put the work in and bring it back to a state of luster that, you know, it wants to reside in. Remove the stains. Take the time to do it. Mark, you don't want to go to bed with stains in your sheets, right?
No.
I would hope not like some bad Motel 6. But
Right.
what you want to do is you want to be around that cleanliness. So carry that cleanliness through to the mind. Remove those stains. Do the work. Much like you would be cleaning your house, you have to do housekeeping in the body itself and with the thoughts. There's no difference amongst these things.
Great points. Page 48, he also said, the consciousness maintains the thoughts whereby through them feelings are then created. The feelings in turn create new thoughts, and these in turn, new feelings, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I guess the thoughts and the feelings go back and forth, creating one or the other.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that. I knew that the feelings, is it the thoughts usually go and create the feelings, but it's both.
Thoughts.
It goes both ways.
You have your thoughts.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, they feed each other. So let's think about this cycle. I'm going to think about something. Mm-hmm. When I think about something, I also can have an emotional response. Now, when I bring those together, I have a feeling. My feeling is a combination of the emotional response plus the thought. Mm. My feelings I can manage. My emotions are hormonal responses, right? Like all of these other, energetic things that happen. So you have this cycle that sort of feeds itself. So I was thinking, I had an emotional response. Now I have a feeling when I think back to that response and those thoughts. And now I'm going to have a new thought. Now I have to, about that feeling I just had. That's an interesting feeling. Let me think about it. Now that I've thought about it, my emotions are changing. And because of that, now I have a new feeling about that previous feeling I had before. And they feed each other in cycle. Total, just pure brazen regulation, right, within the mind. And nothing can exist, Mark, nothing, without something before it. Something has to precede something else, okay? There has to be some sort of form. And so in order to have new feelings, I have to have old feelings, which have to have older emotions and thoughts. They have to precede those things. But they're always feeding into it like new learning material, right? It's this weird squishiness. This thing's always moving in your brain, trying to form itself, right? And you're working with this material, and it's always reforming, new plasticity, new neurons are firing, new ways of feeling into your world and adapting to it.
I've had some new feelings and thoughts about what's going on in the world. I got some interesting information this week, and you probably are aware of a lot of this.
Let's discuss.
You've heard of the Larry Fink, Lawrence Douglas Fink,
Larry Fink, isn't he a banker?
American billionaire.
Yeah.
He's the chairman, CEO of BlackRock.
Yeah, I know the guy. Yeah, banker.
Yeah. American Multinational Investment Management Corporation. I guess that's a bank.
Mm-hmm. It's an investment bank. Yeah.
Yeah. And BlackRock. Now listen to this. BlackRock controls $10 trillion in assets.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than every other nation in the world except the United States and China.
Yeah. We have, you know what GDP is, right? Gross domestic product. Yeah. So a majority of the U.S. GDP, because we don't really manufacture a lot of stuff, we export financial services. That's what we do. We create these power centers where 70% of our GDP is actually financial services and financial products. And because of those flows, because managing macro, macro commodities or, any other assets, ETFs, derivatives, whatever it might be, a lot of that management flows through the United States. Now, to be clear, the derivatives market. So when you think 10 trillion in assets, people think stocks and bonds and cash. No. It is some of that. And then another vast majority of it is the derivatives market. So they are bets that are held on top of these things. So finance is really interesting, and the numbers become very, very large. And I'm not saying that they don't control a vast majority of the resources. They're probably one of the top three that do so. And it gives them a unique position of power to really do whatever the hell they want on this planet. But
exactly.
there's many things that go into that calculation. So we have to just be clear about, how 10 trillion in assets looks. And it doesn't mean they can spend 10 trillion. They manage it for a lot of other people that put their money into BlackRock with things like iShares, right? And for their investment management or retirement or whatever else might be.
But doesn't that create a situation where this guy, Larry Fink, is more powerful than nations?
Oh, yeah, well, without a doubt. Oh, hands down. Without a doubt. They probably have incredible military, political influence, social influence, without a doubt, Mark. No question about it.
They own a lot of these military companies like Boeing.
They probably own a big chunk, right?
Yeah, big chunk. Yeah.
Yeah. And people buy into iShares. Yeah.
They may have the controlling interest.
In some places they do, right? And right now they're also trying to get controlling interest in things like Bitcoin.
Boy, that's a whole
can of worms.
Discussion. Yeah. Well, okay. We've got the disintegration of the dollar that's taking place with the BRIC nations. The BRICS nations are getting off the dollar.
Uh-huh.
What are you taking any preparation on that yet? I've been contemplating it. I'm doing things. I'm trying to liquidate the cash that I have and buy physical things.
Mm-hmm. What, like gold and silver?
Well, not gold. I haven't done that yet. But finish paying off my house or what other things I need, stuff like that.
If the dollar is becoming worth less, pay your bill down, right? On anything. Get rid of as much debt as possible.
Yeah, that's what I've done. I've got rid of all my debt. I don't have any debt.
For a majority of the public, they're not good at hedging with financial instruments, using derivatives, knowing how to buy, long tail options on the other side of the market, right? Like long puts or calls, depending on what you're doing. There's strategies to hedge against this. So
have you purchased any gold yet or anything like that?
I own gold. Yeah.
Good for you. Physical?
Yeah, I have physical gold, and then there's you can also buy shares of it online through other ETFs and stuff.
Do you trust ETFs?
Yeah. Are you kidding me? Okay. Mark, think about this. How do you think BlackRock's making their money?
I have no idea.
This is the market they play in. They're not going to try and trash that market. They need to preserve it. They know where the money is. And when the markets go down, they make money. When the markets go up, they still make money. They make more money.
Right.
Are you worried about the dollar?
Oh, yeah. I think the dollar could go. It could crash. But
bound to happen.
I'm wrong. I think Billy's even talked about that.
Sure. Bound to happen.
Eventually.
Yeah, especially as the reliance on oil continues to taper off further and further and further. And then we're detached from this thing called the petrodollar. But that's a bigger economic conversation, honestly.
Rather, the petrodollar is the BRICS nations are getting off the petrodollar, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like China and Saudi Arabia and all the other ones.
For you, just pay off your debt.
I have. Believe me.
Pay it off now before it becomes more expensive to pay it off later. That's all.
And you don't. Yeah, exactly. It'll be more expensive because you don't want to hold that cash out there because it's going to decline in value, right?
Yeah, the interest isn't going to change. You're just going to have to work 4 times harder to pay it off then. You don't want to do that.
Exactly. I just thought I would throw that in. That's one of the things.
Good.
So I did not realize that we had these, I didn't realize how powerful a guy like Larry Fink is. And it feels to me almost like organized crime. I don't know that.
Like OPEC?
Yeah. Explain. Does that remind you of organized crime, OPEC?
Yeah. Because in some respects, you're managing supply.
Yeah.
You're self-managing supply across a very small group, making people reliant on it. And then you can change the pricing at whim. It's like whether it's oil or the drug trade, they're both the same to me. It's organized crime.
Oh, really?
Yeah. To me, I don't see much of a difference in it, except it's just legal to strip the earth of its oil and then.
What do you think about lithium? I mean, lithium is, that's what goes in the batteries, but isn't it a mess? Just
Well, mining
getting
lithium is a mess.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Lithium is also useful for nuclear reactors, fission and fusion type reactors, for creating fuels for them.
So, but do you think we can make a switch to electric cars? It's not going to work, is it?
Nope.
But the people in control are trying to make it work or something. They're making noises like
some.
I mean, you've heard
some noise, but a lot of them are having to push towards hydrogen, like driving around with a bomb in your car, I suppose. But
did you ever hear of the guy Stanley Myers, the guy that he created
water engine?
Yeah, it was a gallon. He could run a gallon of water for like 60 miles or 100 miles or some crazy.
Yeah, if he can efficiently get an engine to run off of the hydrogen from hydrolysis, where you're separating the molecules in the water by putting an electric charge through it, and if you can burn some of that, yeah, sure. I don't know. We've been doing it for a while. I don't know.
If he found the key to make it work, and because otherwise it takes a lot of energy just to run that electricity through the hydrogen, right?
It does. It really does.
You have to do it the right way.
Because if you think about the bond at an atomic level of water, that's incredible. And then you have to separate that. It takes a lot of energy, right?
Yeah.
So
he was killed. You heard about him, didn't you?
Sure. Yeah.
The whole story, Stanley Myers. Do you follow Dr. Greer at all? Dr. Stephen Greer?
I know of him. Yeah, the guy with the pock face talks a lot about.
Oh man, come on now.
What? Isn't that what it's called? Pock face?
I'm just.
No, I know. I'm just. That's and he wears glasses, right? And
you're being very honest. You're being extremely honest.
Well, I am. I'm describing the person.
Yeah.
I think he gets off on some wild tangents and goes down a route of internal.
Like some of those
I don't know.
Pictures. Some of the things those guys have filmed, I think, are real.
Sure.
UFOs. Some of them, I'm not so sure.
No, I'd say probably a majority are just crap. And then you have some good ones. I find Greer is too emotional in some respects. Yeah. To me, when I don't know him personally,
right.
But I have a pretty good read on people. There seems to be an emotional instability in the gentleman, and he's almost addicted to the nature of what he's doing. Yeah.
Oh. Well, yeah.
Nothing's wrong. Like, fuck it. I mean, challenge the government. You're going to lose every single time, but challenge it. Go for it. Actually, he's not even challenging the government. He's trying to challenge like Black Ops project. There's a reason they're Black Ops because they have more money, they have more power, and there's no way to shut them down. Like, it's a losing game. It's a losing game he's playing.
Interesting.
And I call it a game because he deals too much in the politics of it.
Okay, I'm going to get even more controversial here.
You're yanking me down a rabbit hole right now. You know that?
It's going to get worse too. Yeah. That's the problem. So we have to play this by ear a little bit. Okay, my show tends to go all over the place, especially lately. I don't know why.
It's okay.
So we can talk. We're going to talk a little bit about the death of Christ, the judgment of sin.
Okay.
The term Elohim.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever listen to any of the Mauro Biglino stuff?
Well, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the original Hebraic text of the Bible and the translation of the word Elohim, because it talks about a collective of these gods, wherever they might be. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right. Okay, let me read Mark 15:33, the death of Jesus. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? However, some of the people there thought he was crying out to Elijah, which that's not what was happening. But that Eloi, Eloi, I guess, is very similar to Elohim.
Yeah, it is. Because it's like the Hebraic plural, right? The Elohim rather than Elo. But here's the tough part for me.
It's okay. It's all right. I know this is very controversial.
Yeah, and it's fine. Like, I don't. This Jesus dude was a real figure for sure. Was that his real name? Probably not. Did he say most of these things? Probably not. Did he say some things that stuck? Sure. Was a lot of it obfuscated by people that surrounded him? Yes. Can I tell there's an obvious issue with his disciples all, being males? Yeah. What kind of patriarchal, chauvinistic bullshit is that? Are you telling me women weren't smart enough at that time? That's crap. If this guy was so evolved, he definitely would have had women around him. But when it comes to this sort of text, when I think about the author of it, who might have been Mark, what does Mark want to say? What is Mark trying to say? Mark is not writing the annals, right? He is not going through this and actually dictating every single thing. He's building a story, and hopefully it has a metaphor in it that's enough of an allegory for people to be like, I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to go through the rules like this. But if you consider it at that time, you had the Brahmins, right, in India. They were sort of polytheistic in some sense, and then the ancient Egyptians were polytheistic, and then the Hebrews were the first people to really take on, I'd say monotheism in one sense, where the tetragrammaton they used to worship.
Yes, YHWH.
Yeah, Yahweh. Yeah, but go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, hold those thoughts. All those thoughts are good. I'm going to read it. So Christ, the Christian doctrine is that during the time he was judged for the sins of the world, Christ was forsaken by God. And when Jesus died, the temple, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting that all of the sins in the past and in the future were already judged. And I don't think I don't have a real understanding of the righteousness of God. Now, what is interesting is this is totally, you could say this is in total conflict with the Meyer material, but it never, I don't know, it just doesn't strike me that way. It probably does other people though.
So God, right? Elo, whatever you want to call it, Yahweh, Krishna, I don't give a shit. Call it what you want, right? So you talk to me about this line, like God was already working through the sins of everybody else in the future. Why would my God punish me if he already knows the sins I'm going to do? What fucking difference does it make to this thing in the sky if it already understands I'm going to fuck up? If it's already predetermined for me to screw up, it's already known, why would I even try to get to heaven? The thing already knows in totality. Why would I try to save me? Why would I try to find salvation with this thing which has already marked me for damnation? It's completely illogical. There's no balance between it whatsoever. How could this thing possibly know all the sins? Am I carrying some sort of karma forward? Who am I unwinding the sins for? What do I have to be born from good parents to be a good person? No, that's crap. We know that's not true. Do I have to be a bad person to start to hopefully become a good person? Do I have to go into eternal damnation? What's my guarantee of being saved? Why even try if you know I'm going to screw up? What's the point? And who's to determine, looking around, you a sinner? You're definitely a sinner. You're a sinner. You're a scumbag, right? You're not going to, you know what I mean? Like, it's completely ridiculous. Now, in the sense of the Meyer material, what is a sin? It's an error. A sin is an error. If you etymologically go back and look at the origination of this word, where it's coming from, before the church took it, turned it into some sick historical cycle that you can't get out of, and they constantly want to remind you of it, and you have to pray to make your way out of it. The sin is an error. I make errors all day long. Does that make me some sick sort of sinner that's going to be into damnation? No. These errors, these sins which I have, are my learning material to write and help me evolve. Rather than saying it's the thing that'll cast you into eternal hellfire, in the Mind material it says this is the stuff that allows you to evolve if you choose to evolve from it. Rather than saying it's a mark against you, this is exactly what you need. This is your rich, fertile farming material for you to grow from. And you need to learn from it. Don't try and repeat them all the time because it's just a mistake. But that's really what this thing is. Sin has nothing to do with God. It's about us taking our conscious learning process as physical beings on this planet in a third or fourth dimensional shift, going through and trying to right ourselves from the wrongs we make with no judgment. No judgment necessary. You'll take care of that yourself. People are so hard on themselves all the time. You don't need a God, some third party to say, you better do this, you suck, get your fat ass up out of bed, go work harder, fix this problem, you're a sinner, you know what, you might as well just give up. You know, I can't believe Jesus died on the cross for you. You're such a bum. Put more money in the coffer. Maybe some people come out of purgatory. Like, the whole narrative is completely ass backwards. Makes no sense. It's totally illogical. And this idea of sin is so punishing, which is wrong. It's just wrong. All it is an error. And errors have to be corrected. NASA makes errors. Do you call them a bunch of sinners? No. Scientists, normal people, farmers, they screw up. You know, we're not impervious from it. We're not gonna, you know, it's not gonna we're not gonna not commit an error, because if we were error free, what would there be to learn? There'd be no point of evolution. There'd be no point of the creation. It's illogical at that point. And so when you say, or God in this Marx sense says, you know, God, you know, is doing this and understands the sins of the future. What are you talking about? If he already knows what mistakes will be made in the future, then it would have already perfected itself, and there'd be no necessity for evolution or having more people around. The whole thing's dumb. It's completely counterintuitive and illogical. That's how I feel, Mark.
No problem. I have a way of picking the most controversial.
Oh,
things.
man. I think I'm sweating. I'm so amped up.
Okay. Let me read something here that kind of goes along with what you're saying, and this is Contact Report 251.
Personal favorite.
The genetically manipulated people have, since that time, established themselves on Earth to the degree that they've simultaneously become its planet's rulers and its destroyers. Most of them remained overly entangled in the effects of the ancient scientists on a different world manipulated genes of fighting, viciousness, barbarism, bloodthirstiness, greediness, addiction, emotionalness, inhumanities, to name but a few of the characteristics. The characteristics themselves have been a hideous legacy for mankind from earlier times. The genetic changes have been referred to as original sin.
Yeah. It's an error in the genetic code. Someone fucked up.
Put one there on purpose, right?
Yeah. And it was a mess up. You think you're doing something right, you screw up. But then you let this thing breed and breed and breed and get out of control. It's like, wow, this was a big screw up. Now, for people here, it seems like this original thing. Why? Because at a genetic level, when you're born, you're stuck with the genetics. So it's this original error that we have to unwind in our genetic code. Very difficult to do. Will take a very, very long time. But you, through the work of your consciousness, can help deal with these aggression receptors, these responses, right? Between serotonin and melatonin and all this other good stuff and having a deficiency in it. But you see it. You see the rage in people. You see the crazy bloodshed that we've done. And when someone kills once, it becomes very easy for them to kill multiple times over, because there's such a lack of reception to the normal balance of things.
And what's going on in Israel right now is really bad.
Well, not just Israel, but also Palestine. You got to remember, the Palestinian Hamas, right, through that group, also paid for by the Iranians, they're a terrorist organization. And if you go even further back, when they had outlawed guns in the area, do you know what happened in Israel with Hamas?
Oh, Hamas probably just ended up killing more people.
And how did they do that? They went from instead shooting guns directly to strapping bombs to children and walking them into city centers. Wow. Now, Israel, I don't agree with the war tactics. I never agree with war. But It's not just looking at today, it's looking at the whole balance of the entire thing. Yes, is there acts of genocide going on? Of course. Is it run by a select few people in the government? Absolutely. Are there tons of beautiful, wonderful Jewish Israeli people? Yes. Same for Palestinians? Absolutely. But there are small groups using an excuse of aggression from terrorist extremist organizations, okay, on one side, coming in, making some sort of claim, and then people wrap it up into all this religious stuff, and then the people in Israel running aspects of the military are like, this is a good thing we could do. We can use this. This is how we eradicate the issue we have at large. It's just bad processes. It's a total disrespect for life on both sides.
Yeah, and how does that all, I mean, are we seeing a similar thing in the Ukraine?
The Ukraine is neo-Nazism.
Aren't there Nazis in the Ukraine?
Well, yeah, of course. There's been Nazis in Eastern Europe for a long time. There's been a big wave of neo-Nazism, and it's continued to rise back up. And look at some of the rhetoric that's happened in the Ukraine. But if you analyze it and you start to see these people, see the parades, the marches, the clothing, what they're doing, it's taking on all the old fascist ideas, right? All the national socialist parties coming together. It's the same sort of elements, but they're now taking on a new faces.
So the U.S. government is supporting the Nazis in Ukraine, right?
The U.S. government supports, how would I put this? They support NATO. NATO wants to get its little claws into everybody in the EU and then find some sort of fight to pick on with Russia. Leave Russia alone. If there's a conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it's their conflict.
Yeah, it's their conflict.
But it's a classic thing the United States always does, who has way too much power over NATO, is we try to be the world cop. Why do you think so many terrorist organizations hate us? Why do you think we had things like 9/11, right? Or the other bombings in the 90s that happened at the Trade Center and everything else that occurs?
Do you think what's going on in the Ukraine is worse than Vietnam?
No.
About the same then?
No, Vietnam was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was just horrible.
Vietnam's went on a lot longer than what we've gone with the Ukraine. Ukraine's only, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's an all-around, Mark. It's just bad. I don't want to rate it. It's just bad. If there's any work that is done to maliciously end a life of another, it's just bad. Just bad news. Mm-hmm. It's bad. It's really bad.
So, but what seems different, I mean, it may just be me being a little older and a little wiser. It seemed like, at least in Vietnam, they could make some kind of logical argument that they were trying to stop communism. You think that was so totally shallow, so totally...
You can come up with any reason under the sun. And I'll tell you right now, it's not communism. Terrible. Did we push from Vietnam directly into Russia? Did we?
No.
Did we take over the Chinese? No, it had nothing to do with communism. It's crap.
So what do you think about the Korean War?
The police effort you're talking about.
Yeah, but there was a lot of fighting that went on.
Of course there was a ton of fighting. Everybody needs there's just always an excuse. Drums up the economy, whatever.
That's really the real reason, right?
Yeah.
All these wars is economic.
Does BlackRock do better when people go to war?
Of course.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's the underlying thing. War makes a lot of money for some groups, correct?
Yeah. It's also super distracting. What are you doing right now, Mark? Only talking about war. Not what everybody else is doing to steal more power and acquire more commercial real estate here in the United States or anywhere else in the world.
Right.
You're distracted. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. They're getting exactly what they want. And it's very divisive. It splits people up. I hate what's going on in Israel. Oh, I don't like what's going on in Palestine. I'm pro this, I'm pro that.
Well, won't the Israelis go through there and just drop their 2,000-pound bombs?
They'll drop whatever they want. Yeah. I don't know why. Because they have their own free will and they can make those choices, even though those choices may be wrong. They'll still do it.
Mm-hmm. But that's typically what they've been doing, right? Dropping those 2,000-pound bombs. The F-15 Strike Eagles. They just completely wipe out those entire huge buildings.
Mm-hmm. No, it's funny. Remember Hurricane Katrina?
Oh, yeah.
They told people to leave.
They didn't.
Didn't they? They said, clear the hell out of here. Guess what they did? Didn't leave. I don't know. You know, if I was in Palestine, knowing how Israel reacts in the past,
get out of there.
Damn well knowing that I have Hamas around me too, as just a happy, healthy Palestinian that likes rave music, I'd get the hell out of there in a hot second. That's just me.
Yeah.
But choosing to stay, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't live there. I'm not in the war zone. I'm unsure. One day I will visit the old city. I will. And
Jerusalem?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Interesting point, right? Because you have it's essentially the closest place in many of the major, from Christianity to Islam and the Hebraic religion, Judaism. There's a mosque, there's a synagogue, and a church all in one spot. They're always fighting over this land, but they do have some sort of agreement that it is a holy place to them in some respects. But the bloodshed, what does it all boil down to at the end? The religious ideologies, religious tendencies, Islamic fundamentalism, hate towards other, groups and religions. I mean, it's crazy. It's actually exhausting to think about.
We need to grow out of this.
We're not going to grow out of it anytime soon. What we're going to do is we're going to become so efficient at killing each other. So super efficient. So many people will continue to die. Nothing will end until, I would say, the Roman Catholic Church goes away. Nothing will end. So much of us in the United States is tied into it. So many people doing things in the name of God. If you did something in the name of yourself and you were raised with this idea that you're responsible for everything that you do, probably change a lot of people's behaviors, right? But it's easy to pass off the responsibility or say, I killed this person because I had to do it for God or to preserve the nationalism or security of my country. Even when I say that, it sounds dumb coming out of my mouth. Don't get me wrong. I have plenty of family members serve in the military. Right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
A lot of close friends in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But as a whole, dumb.
I have this weird fascination with military things, like particularly aircraft. I don't know what it is. It's a strange addiction.
Favorite aircraft, go. What is it? Go.
F-16 Fighting Falcon.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Jeez.
It's because of its maneuverability. That's what I like.
Yeah.
There's always something that I think the F-22 has been a bit of a marketing thing. Is it really stealthy enough? I don't know. Isn't that crazy? I wonder why that part of the key here with all this Myers stuff is it helps us to understand our self a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was talking about the stain in the stream of consciousness.
Stain in the brain. That's what I'm going to call it. Brain stains. Sir, you have a lot of brain stains. We got to wash those out.
Oh, man, that can't be the end of the show. We just got started, dude. Okay, next show, something light, something mellow.
I could do that. I could use some of that. Mark, thanks for having me on again today.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.